Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Reclaiming Your Credit. I'm Greg Berry, Director of Communications in the Office of Alumni Affairs. Since we're coming to you virtually, please excuse technical issues or glitches that may pop up. If you have problems with your video or audio, click the reconnect button on your screen to get back to the webinar quickly. A quick note, we are recording this webinar. A replay will be made available on our website by tomorrow. If you have questions for Dr. Yates throughout our presentation, please drop them in the chat. We'll have time for Q&A at the end. This webinar is part of our Backpacks to Briefcases series. Through it, you can earn credit towards an evergreen certificate. And it's really simple. Throughout the year, join us for events and webinars with topics ranging from finance to personal growth and volunteer opportunities and even lunch and learns. Discover more about the program at alumni.uab.edu/backpacks. Today, we're excited to welcome Dr. Stephanie Yates. Dr. Yates is the inaugural director of the Regions Institute for Financial Education and the Regions Institute for Financial Education Endowed Professor. She obtained her MBA and MBA from the University of Cincinnati before earning her PhD from LSU. Dr. Yates is an accredited financial counselor, certified financial planner, and a registered financial consultant. At this time, I would like to welcome Dr. Yates to our webinar series. Thank you so much for joining us and carving a little time out of your day to spend with us.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. So are we ready to get started?
You are ready to roll.
Okay. So reclaiming your credit. We're going to talk about this in terms of three things to think about. First, we have to get the landscape. And so that means reviewing where are we with our credit. So reviewing your current credit situation. Then if there's some things that maybe aren't the best or maybe are inaccurate, let's go and talk about repairing your credit relative to those items. And then finally, once we've fixed everything that we can, how do we get better? How do we rebuild our credit? So these are the three areas that we're going to talk about. So let's start with the review. So reviewing your credit means that you've got to get a copy of your credit report. So you've got to get the report and you've got to get the score. And those are two separate things. So when you request your credit report, that report is just that line listing of all of the financial institutions and other creditors who have extended credit to you and how you've managed that credit. But the credit score is a number from about 300 to 850, depending on the bureau. That is a quick way for a potential creditor or for you when you're just kind of doing your own checkup to get a sense for how well you've managed credit and how risky it would be to extend additional credit to you. So we're still thinking about reviewing our credit. We just talked about the difference between a credit report and a credit score. So how do you go about getting your credit report or your credit score? Well, by law, you are entitled to a copy of your credit report. Remember, that's the line listing for free every year or every 12 months, if you want to be really specific about it. And so very specifically, though, you're entitled to a copy from all three credit bureaus. And so that means that you don't have to get all three copies at one time. And let's hold that thought for a minute. There's a centralized request service where you can go and ask for your credit report from any of those three bureaus or all of them. And so, but if you have requested new credit and you've been denied, then again, by law, the bureaus are obligated to give you a copy of your credit report for free. Because think about it, if someone refuses to extend credit to you based on what's in your credit report, then you ought to be able to see what they used, what was the basis for that decision. So that's going to be free as long as you make the request within 60 days of that denial. And also, if you suspect fraudulent activity related to your credit file, then the credit bureaus also have to give you a free copy of your report so you can check it out and clean it up if necessary. So those are the free ways to get a copy of your credit report. But also, if you don't qualify for one of those free ways, you can always just request a copy and pay for it. And so that's going to cost you $14.50 per report. Again, there's 3 bureaus. So if you want a copy from all 3 bureaus, it's going to cost you $14.50 times 3. So how do you get to that centralized request service? That's annualcreditreport.com. It's not freecreditreport.com. You may have seen some of those commercials. Annualcreditreport.com is the one that will give you a free copy, no strings attached, once a year for each bureau. So here's the phone number, or if you don't want to call or go online, you can actually mail in a copy of the form, but you're going to have to go online to get the form itself. Now, on the paid side, if you want to just go directly to the bureaus and pay the $14.50, the 3 credit bureaus are Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. So here is the contact information for those 3 credit bureaus. Now, I mentioned, let's just go back to these bureaus. I mentioned that by law, you can get a free copy each year from each bureau, but it may make sense to kind of stretch those out, meaning don't request all 3 at one time. You can kind of do some homemade credit monitoring if you just take advantage of your rights and request 1 every 4 months. So you go to annualcreditreport.com, and maybe in January, you ask for your Equifax report. And then in May, you ask for Experian. And then in September, you ask for TransUnion. They're not going to be that different. I mean, the bureaus may format them differently, but the information that's on the reports shouldn't be that different. But if you request them at different intervals, that will give you an opportunity to see your credit report, which again isn't going to differ that much across the bureaus, every 4 months. And so the chances are, if there's something weird on one, it's going to show up on the other 2. Why do we have 3? I don't really know, but I can tell you from experience, from having actually worked for a department store that reported to the credit bureaus, a lot of times creditors won't report to all 3 bureaus. They're just going to report to the one that has the strongest presence in their region. So that's why you want to check all 3, because it is possible that something was reported to one and not to the others. So it's really important. Again, we're still talking about the first step in reviewing your credit. So it's really important to understand your rights. So we talked about the fact that you have the right to request and receive a copy of your report, not the score, but the report, at no cost to you once a year or within 60 days from being denied. And so that is federal law that requires these credit bureaus to give you a copy on request. Now, the credit score is not free. So it's your right to ask for it, but they can charge you for the credit score. So remember, the report is the list of all of your activity. The score is that number from 300 to 850. So even when you go to annualcreditreport.com and you ask for the report, they may give you the option, or they should give you the option, to request the score, and there will be a charge for that. So when you see that, don't think, oh, it's a scam. No, because the score isn't free. And so also, if a creditor rejects you or charges you a higher price for the credit, whatever credit you've applied for based on your credit score, they have to give you a copy of the score that they base that decision on. So they're not allowed to just kind of do this in the dark. They have to tell you what not publicly available, but what credit bureau information they use to make decisions about whether or not to extend credit to you. And if you're applying for a mortgage lenders have to give you information about your credit score for free. And so typically with a mortgage, that lender is going to request scores from all three bureaus, and then they have to tell you what those scores were. They typically will base their decision on the middle score. So they'll throw out the highest and the lowest, but they have to tell you what they were. Also, when the credit bureaus report this information to you, particularly relative to your credit score, they don't have to tell you kind of what the formula was, and none of us really know exactly what the formula is, but they have to tell you the factors that impacted your score. So we've talked about the credit report and how to get it, and now we've talked about the credit score. Here's how to get it. If you don't ask for it when you're asking for your credit report, there are other ways to get it as well. So just like before, there are free ways and there's fee ways. So free ways, I really like Credit Karma. You go to creditkarma.com. Now you're going to have to give them their social security number, because how else are they going to know who you are and what information to pull? But it's very safe. But just be prepared that once you sign up for an account with Credit Karma, they're going to give you credit card offers and things like that, because it's the credit card companies that are paying for this and keeping it free for you. That doesn't mean that you have to take advantage of any of these offers and get a new credit card, but just know that you're going to see some ads on the website. But that is one way that you can get your credit score at no cost to you. And it will also, the Credit Karma website will also give you some suggestions. Well, if you don't like your score, here's some things that you can do to increase your score. Or if you couldn't pay your bills this month, here's what could happen to your credit score. Now, staying on the free side, if you have a credit card with certain credit card issuers, oftentimes they will provide your credit score as well. So for example, I believe Discover will actually print your credit score on your monthly statement. If you bank with Capital One, they have, what is it called? Credit Wise, I believe, on their website. And so you can click on that Credit Wise link and it will regularly update you on your credit score. So I only list Credit Karma because that's available to everyone, but there are some other free ways to get your credit score depending on with whom you bank. Now, if you're willing to pay a fee, you can go to myfico.com. And I'm not sure what the current cost is for a credit score, but you can find it out there. And they've also got some really good informational items just about credit and credit scoring. So now let's move to the second part. So the first part was reviewing, second part is repairing your credit. So now, because you've gone through the first part, you've gotten a copy of your credit report from at least one of the bureaus, and you've got your credit score. Now, if you see some things in there that aren't very good, or maybe just aren't accurate, or you just don't recall, then now's the time to think about repairing your credit. Now, I know that there are a lot of companies out there that will offer to do this for you for a fee. I don't recommend them, but we'll hold that thought and let's go through the list. So when you're repairing your credit, here are the things that you need to do. First, look for inaccuracies. If there's anything on that report that is just flat out wrong and you know it, you know that you've never had a credit card with XYZ company, or you know that you never paid this bill late, or you know that anything else that may be on there, you just know absolutely that it is not true. Then if you've requested your report from annualcreditreport.com, they're on their website, they will have links where you can go in and dispute any of those inaccuracies, but you're going to have to dispute them directly with the credit bureau that provided you with that particular report that had those inaccuracies. So the same thing, if you went directly to the credit bureau, you'll go back to them. And these days, it's so much easier because you can do it all online. So these days, you can just go back to the Equifax website if you went directly to them to get your report, and you can click on the specific item that is incorrect, and you can dispute it right there, and you can give your explanation. In the old days, for those of you who are curious, we had to write letters. And so, you're working with someone, or you're working on your own behalf, you see something that's not correct on your report, and you have to write a letter, and you have to mail it off. So back before all of this stuff was online, you have to mail it off, and then you have to wait, and then you have to write another letter. But these days it moves a lot faster because of technology. So that's the first step, is fix anything that is inaccurate. And then if that doesn't work, so it's kind of this circle where you do your part, you wait for it to update, and then you see what else needs to be adjusted. So now when you say, well, this isn't correct, what's happening while you're waiting is that the credit bureau goes back to the creditor who reported that item and asks them to prove that this is correct. And so if they do that and they come back and the creditor says, nope, that person really did make that late payment, or they really did open that account, that's when you call the creditor and you say, nope, this is not correct. Or maybe it is correct and you just want to call and say, hey, I'm trying to buy a house, or I'm trying to clean up my credit, or I was young and made a mistake. Would you be willing to take this off my credit file? And believe it or not, that actually works. It's amazing how many good things can happen to us if we just ask for help. So once you address and dispute the errors or the items that you believe are erroneous on your report, then call or email, or however you want to do it, contact the creditors and ask them if they will remove derogatory items. Next, if you have student loans that you've defaulted on, you have some rights related to those student loans. For example, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, but if you took out a student loan from a college or a university that went out of business, you actually have the right to get that removed, because effectively the value of that education has gone down a little bit, so you shouldn't have to pay the debt. So make sure that you understand your rights related to student loans. And then even if that's not the case, there's still some things that you can do if you've defaulted and simply because you didn't make your payments. It all is not lost. So again, we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize is that public record information is often on your credit report. And so, and I think I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on this as well, but that's another set of items that you want to go in and try to address if possible. So first we've got creditors, then we've got student loans, now we've got public record information. Also, old information of any type. The information on your credit report should not be 20 years old. So regular, non-bankruptcy information should only be on your file for 7 years. Bankruptcy stay a little bit longer at 10 years, and then inquiries where you just applied for credit should only be on your file for 2 years. So if you've got something on your file that's older than that, then you need to ask for that to be removed as well. So now let's say we've done all of those things, but there's just still some stuff on there that no one's willing to take off because it's accurate, it's timely, and you're just stuck with it. If that's the case, then you should explain. You should explain. So if someone pulls their credit, they're going to see maybe these derogatory things, but they'll also see your explanation. And that could be that you lost your job, that you had medical issues, that you had personal issues. And so that can help someone on the outside looking in understand what your situation was at the time that led to that issue. And so if they see, well, this bad thing happened, but here's why, and now they're doing all these good things, then you could see someone make a decision in your favor. As you're working through this, though, it's really important not to overreact. Sometimes people will threaten you because they want you to do whatever it is that they want you to do, typically to pay them. And so if they threaten, well, I'm going to kill your credit and you're never going to be able to buy anything on credit for the rest of your life. If you know the law and you know your rights, then that shouldn't ruffle you. There's certain, you've got to be able to eat and live and get back and forth to work and take care of your current obligations. That comes first. Then we address credit. So don't let someone harass you and scare you because of credit. And then lastly, I'm kind of walking you through the steps to manage all of this yourself. And therefore, I just personally don't think that we need credit repair agencies, because you can do all of this. It just takes time, but you can do it for free if you've got good information. And really, the main reason why I don't like credit repair agencies is because a lot of times they just overcharge and for things that we can do ourselves and things that are not lasting improvements. So let's backtrack a little bit and just go into a little bit more detail on some of the things that I said. So I was kind of giving you the overview on how to repair your credit. So just some things to keep in mind. You have the right to make corrections. If there's something being said and shared about you that's not right, that is incorrect, it is your legal right to change it. And so the credit bureaus really are your friend, because they're the ones that are acting as a repository for this information and collecting it and then sharing it with other potential creditors. So they've got to work with you. And so anytime you dispute something that you don't believe is accurate, the credit bureau has to investigate. And they have to go back to that creditor or whomever it is and ask them to prove or confirm that the information is accurate. Because, sometimes keying errors happen. Sometimes, people just make mistakes and they put something in your credit file that shouldn't be there. But the credit bureau has to investigate if you dispute, but they don't have to do anything if you don't ask. And so when they investigate, this is really key. They have to get back to you within 30 days. And so this is a place where a lot of the credit repair agencies operate, because they work off of this requirement that the bureau has to investigate within 30 days. And so what they'll do, well, let me finish that thought. If they don't get a response back from the creditor within 30 days, the credit bureau has to remove that derogatory item from your file. But the creditor can always just report it again. So what typically happens with creditors is this is just all done electronically. And so they have a file with all of their customers and their payment history and their account balances and their account limits. And so they just send that file every month or every 90 days or however often they choose to send it. And so what's really important for you in order to clean up your credit is to get the file corrected. Because if the bureau just takes something off today, next week, when that creditor sends the file again, it could go back on. So what happens with a lot of these credit repair companies is they'll just keep sending requests to overload the credit bureaus and the creditors so that they can't possibly respond within 30 days and they have to take it off. But eventually those kind of systems catch up with people. In fact, it's been such a detriment to credit reporting agencies that that's actually illegal. So technically, you cannot dispute something if you aren't reasonably certain that it's incorrect. And you cannot just keep sending letter after letter after letter about the same thing. And also, if you're successful in getting something removed, you can ask the credit bureau, hey, go back and tell all those people who turned me down that this is the real deal. These things have been changed and here's what my file really looks like or should have looked like when they pulled it. So how do you do this? Like I said, in the old days, we wrote letters. But now that written dispute to the credit bureau is actually done online. So you effectively go into your credit file and you click on the item that you're disputing and you give some sort of an explanation. And so it is okay to say, I just don't remember paying that bill late. I pay all of my bills on time. I don't remember paying that one bill late. And then they have to go back and ask the creditor to confirm. So periodically, you just want to check and make sure that your file is correct. So now, what if you do all that, you dispute the things that are wrong or you don't recall, and you still can't get it corrected? Well, again, you have to dispute it with the credit bureau before anything happens. And so that's kind of what gets the ball rolling and gives you the right to take it a step further. If the creditor doesn't do what they're supposed to do or the bureau doesn't do what they're supposed to do. And so in that case, if you've got evidence that there's something on your file that is incorrect and the creditor won't change it and the credit bureau won't change it, then you can file a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau or the CFPB. So that's consumerfinance.gov. They're the ones who kind of watch the watchers, so to speak. Now, remember, I also said that maybe there's something derogatory, but it's actually correct. Well, you can go to the creditor and just ask them for help. So so first, if it's incorrect, you say, well, here are my records. Can you please make this adjustment? And if maybe they say no, or you really were late, you could possibly even negotiate with them, because if you owe $100 from the creditor's perspective, $50 is better than no dollars. So you could say, okay, I'll give you $50 if you could take this off my credit. And a lot of times they'll agree to do it. Or if you've, and so in that case, if the account is closed, but you still owe something, then you might want to negotiate. And if it's a lot of money, like more than $100, then maybe you can negotiate that you'll pay it over time. But you would be amazed, again, how often people are successful with just asking for help. So now, if the creditor does agree to help you, make sure you get that in writing. So at a minimum, get the name and the phone number of the person that you talk to, but you ask them to get it in writing that they're going to delete it. That's kind of hard because, that's an extra step for them, but do everything you can to get that in writing so that if it doesn't happen, you can say, hey, this person on this day said that they were going to do this thing and they didn't do it. And now what you want to get in writing is very specific. You want to ask them to contact the credit bureau and delete that negative thing. And you want them to make sure that when they send the file again, that they don't just put it back on your report. So you want them to update your record with them and update your record with the credit bureau. And so again, I mentioned that if you've defaulted on a student loan, there are remedies to that as well. Maybe not remedy in terms of making it all go away in every case, but you have options. If you are permanently and totally disabled, you can get that discharged. Sadly, if you die, your estate will not have to pay the student loans. They do die with you. If you work for a public institution, you may be able to get forgiveness through the Public Student Loan Forgiveness Program. Or, and I skipped over the first one, if the school that you attended has gone out of business, you oftentimes will be able to get the debt canceled because of that. So think about what has led you to default. Is there anything going on with the institution, anything going on with you that will allow you to qualify for cancellation of that debt? So again, you don't know if you don't ask. So now let's assume you've got this student loan debt and you can't get it canceled or forgiven. Now what do you do? Well, if you consolidate them, so let's say you have more than one student loan, consolidating them into one, oftentimes at a lower interest rate, will take them out of default. Also, there's such a thing as rehabilitation. So if you rehabilitate your student loans, that will get them out of default, and that makes a big difference on your credit. So a defaulted student loan is a really bad thing. And so there are specific steps that you have to follow to rehabilitate a student loan. But my recommendation is if you fall into this camp where you've got a defaulted student loan that you can't cancel, just call your servicer and just let them know that you are now able to pay. You can't pay the whole thing in full, but you want to get on the right track. And can I rehabilitate my loan? And what would I need to do? And so it gets you, kind of on the right track to establishing a new repayment schedule that you can manage. We also talked about public record information. So that could be, and this is the one that a lot of people don't know is on their credit. That could be any arrests, convictions, judgments, foreclosures, tax liens. And so a tax taking is when they just take the money out of your account. All of that shows up on your credit report. And so this one's a little bit difficult, but the best way to do that is you go to each government entity that has supplied that information to whatever credit bureau, and you ask them, what do I need to do to take this off? How do I need to satisfy it? And a key here in all of these repair items is understanding that an open item is much worse than a closed item. Meaning, if you've got a judgment on your credit report because you didn't pay someone, that is much worse than having a closed item where you paid, you had a judgment, but you paid it off. You settled with that person. So, and also, if let's say you have a judgment because you had a creditor that you didn't pay, you can still pay that creditor and have the creditor go back and remove the judgment from your credit report. So again, it's kind of one of those, you don't know until you ask, and doing nothing is not going to help you at all. You would be amazed by, again, keep saying it over and over, but you would be amazed by what you can get by just asking. So again, make sure that everything is current as well. So after 7 years, anything that went to collections, any lawsuits, judgments, tax liens, most criminal records have to be taken off your credit report in 7 years. If you see something that's older than 7 years, ask for that to be removed. They have to do it. Bankruptcies, again, live for 10 years. But there's some things that never go away. Positive information, but also criminal convictions. Remember also, if you've done all of this and then you've got a few bad things that you're just stuck with, explain it. So you can write a statement. It's used to be 100 words. These days, they're saying that you can write a longer statement, but don't go too long because nobody's going to read all of that. But you can write a statement that explains what happened. Or you can even, some people recommend you go ahead and write the statement while your file is being investigated, so that if somebody looks at your credit report while the investigation is going on, you can say, hey, I'm disputing these things because they're inaccurate, or because whatever your reason is. And so what happens is that just gets added, your statement gets added to your report. So anytime someone requests your statement, your report, they'll see that statement also. And the credit bureau can't charge you for adding your statement. And again, just like any changes or corrections, you can ask the bureau to send that statement to people who have requested your report as well. And lastly, don't overreact. If somebody threatens you, threatens to put something on your file because you didn't pay them on time, or you didn't pay them what they wanted you to pay them, don't overreact. Know your rights, know the law, and do what you need to do to take care of your own affairs. So if you still want to use a credit repair agency after I've given you all the keys to the kingdom, make sure that you still understand your rights. They're not allowed to provide any services until 3 days after you sign a written and dated contract. So that gives you 3 days to change your mind. They are not allowed to charge you in advance. A lot of these less than reputable companies will try to charge you in advance. That's against the law. And you have the right to cancel for any reason during that 3-day period. So make sure in all of these cases you know your rights, because there are a lot of consumer protections related to credit. All right, last step. So we've requested our credit report. We've requested our credit score. We have tried to correct any inaccuracies and dispute anything that was disputable or old, or we just didn't recall, and we've made a statement for anything else. So now what can we do? Our score still isn't where we want it to be. Remember, credit score is between about 300 to 850. We want to be in the 700 range to be considered as having good credit. Well, the first thing is stabilize your situation. So I've got you on an IV drip here, trying to figure out, well, what if your credit isn't so great, how did you get here? And so it may be that you've got bigger issues than credit that you need to address. Maybe you need to think about increasing your income, decreasing your expenses. So let's stabilize your situation first. And then maybe if we're able to, open up some new credit accounts. Maybe you can get a secured credit card as a way to start rebuilding your credit and showing that you can make good decisions. If you had a spouse or a partner who was managing the credit, and now that you two are not together, or maybe you are, but you're still trying to address credit issues, it may be helpful to build credit in your own name. This is particularly helpful for people who have a spouse who's passed away, and maybe that spouse managed all the financial issues, and now this person is left by themselves trying to kind of pick up the pieces, but they can't get any credit because the other spouse took care of it all. So it's really important, spouse or no spouse, widowed or not, to have credit in your own name. But that's part of the rebuilding process potentially. And if you do all of these things and you're still not making progress, or maybe going back to the beginning, you just can't stabilize your situation, bankruptcy is not the end of the world. Yes, it stays on your credit for 10 years, but if that is the only way that you can kind of get above water, it's okay. So at least ask some questions, talk to a bankruptcy attorney, and find out what that would mean for you. So again, that was the overview, getting into the details. So stabilizing, look at your employment, look at your income and your debt, and what's wrong there that's creating these delinquencies. So when we think about the road ahead, creditors a lot of times will look at your trend. So even though you've got some stuff on there from 5 or 6 years ago, maybe they'll ignore it if they can see that in the last 2 or 3 years, you're doing all of the right things. And so each year, your older debt problems are going to matter less and less until they just roll off altogether. So with establishing new credit accounts, you can improve your credit if you get new credit and pay it back on time, because part of your credit score is based on how much of your available credit lines you're using. So if you go from having $500 in available credit to $1,000 in available credit because you've taken out a new credit card and you use it wisely, that can help you. So, but you want to wait and not just take any credit card offer. Now, sometimes we just have to take what we can get, but you want to get a good offer. A good offer meaning the interest rate is low if you're not able to pay it off in full each month, and the fees are low. I talked about getting a secured credit card if you can't get any other type of credit card, because they do help you rebuild. And you want to make sure that whatever you do to try to help improve your credit is actually showing up on your credit report. So keep checking your report and make sure that all of these good things that you're doing are showing up. So again, make sure that you're building credit in your own name. Even if it's, be careful with joint accounts. If it's a joint account and somebody has just given you, or if it's an account in someone else's name and they've just given you a card to use, that may not be helping you. So you want to make sure that if you're trying to build your credit, and I tell this to people who are just starting out as well, that you've got credit in your own name. Co-signed accounts count as well. So if you're trying to build your credit, maybe you can find someone who has good credit and ask them if they can add you to their account. That, that kind of piggybacking can help you build your credit as well. And then lastly, consider bankruptcy. Sometimes folks just need to start fresh. And I know it's going to stick with you for a while, but the ability to either freeze your account so that you're not continuing to incur interest charge, or to discharge that debt altogether, could be the fresh start that someone needs if they just can't get ahead. But again, I would make sure you ask lots and lots of questions to figure out if this is right for you. Because again, if you've got bad stuff on your credit that's already 5 or 6 years old, why would you file bankruptcy to make it go away? Because in another year or two, it's going to be gone anyway. So just think this through very carefully before you do it. So we're at the end of our talk, and I want to make sure that we have time for questions. So I just want to leave you with your next steps, and that's going back to the beginning. order your credit report and get your credit score. So I've given you lots of suggestions on how to do that, but those are your next steps to get started in the process.
Fantastic information. And I did drop the phone number and the website in the chat. So if people need to get in touch and trying to get a hold of their credit report, go ahead and go there. All right, let's start with the questions, and we'll just go from the first to the most recent. What's the difference between FICO score and credit score?
So a FICO score, FICO means that it is a score that was generated by the Fair Isaacs company. So that's where FICO comes from. So FICO is really just a brand of the score. So there's a FICO score, there's a Vantage score. So it just means who has generated that credit score.
Is bad credit just a function of how much debt we may have?
I would say by definition, bad credit would mean a credit score under 600 or 650. Is it a function of how much debt we have? Debt is usually the culprit on how people get to a bad credit score. But you can have bad credit and have never had a loan or a credit card, because you think about all those things that I mentioned that are on your credit report. Mm-hmm. Let's say, so for example, judgments and liens. So let's say that you had a cell phone and you ran up the bill, you never paid it, they turned it off, and you still didn't pay it. Eventually, they're going to sue you. And if you still don't pay, they'll get a judgment against you, and that's going to show up on your credit report. That could be the only thing on your credit report, but now you're going to have a bad credit score because you didn't pay your cell phone bill. So, and that has nothing to do with debt. It was just a cell phone payment. So, but that would be probably an unusual, not the norm. So it's usually debt, but it doesn't have to be.
When creditors talk about good credit, do each of the three, the Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, all have kind of the same range that says this is good, or do they differ?
It's usually in that same range. That's why I say it ranges from about 300 to 850. Some brands do it a little bit differently, but usually 700 and above is considered good. But you might fine tune it a little bit depending on which company you're looking at. Also, I apologize.
No.
One thing I didn't mention is that Experian, one of those three credit bureaus, has a product called Experian Boost. And Experian Boost is another way that you can rebuild your credit. So in your, I talked several times about making sure that you know who's reporting your payments and who's not. Typically, cell phone payments, utility bill payments are not reported to the credit bureaus unless, like the example I gave a minute ago, you never pay, and they sue you. Yeah. With Experian Boost, you can actually opt in. So some of those payments that typically don't get counted will count, and it could boost, hence Experian Boost, it could boost your credit score because they're counting those payments.
Your children are about the same age as mine, where they're in college or they're about to graduate, become young professionals. How do we instill, or what can we kind of have them do at those ages to build their credit as young professionals and college students?
A couple of things that I recommend. First, I actually do recommend to families under the right circumstances piggybacking, meaning if parents have a good payment history and credit score and you've got a credit card, you can add your child onto that credit card so that when you make on-time payments, that counts towards them. And you don't even have to give them access to the credit card. Just give them access to good credit. So that way, when they branch out on their own, they've already got a start on a credit history. Because when you think about the things that impact your credit score, it is your payment history first and foremost. Then it is your credit utilization. Are your accounts maxed out? Then it's the mix of credit. Do you have all Forever 21 store card type accounts, or do you have a mix of store cards and bank cards, and then auto loans, mortgage loans, and the stuff that's harder to get? Then it is inquiries. How many times have you requested credit? And then, actually higher up on the list is the length of your credit history. So for young people, they're not going to have that length of credit history. But if you can add them onto a credit card, they can start building credit before they need it. So that would be my first recommendation to people. Now, if you're not good at paying your bills on time, I wouldn't recommend you do it. But the second thing that I would recommend is assuming that they've got a banking history. Open a savings account as soon as you can, so that they've got a little passbook savings account where they can put the birthday money and that sort of stuff in and start getting an appreciation for money. And then once they start working, get a checking account, because then they can get a debit card and access their money, because with savings accounts, you can only have so many withdrawals a month before you get into trouble. So now they've got a savings account and they've got a checking account. Once they get a little bit older, I recommend, in their 20s, because, these mistakes last 7 years. So once they get a little bit older and now they've had a relationship with a bank for a while, then they can apply for a small credit card. I would, ask for a small limit, but kind of that's the progression that I would recommend for young people.
If you have a balance on an account that expires in a year, does it fall off your credit report with the balance still on the report?
If you have a balance and the balance expires, it will be paid off in a year?
And that's what I'm taking it as, yes.
Does it
still show a zero balance on that credit report?
So
okay.
It will. So that activity will show for 7 years. So let's say let's call it a credit card. Let's say that credit card is going to be paid off next March. So that'll be March of 24. So that will still show until March of 31.
If you
payments that you made, a couple of years ago will start to fall off, but it's based on the activity date.
And the other payments are just catching up for the 7 years.
Right.
If you pay over the minimum, but you still have an outstanding balance, will it negatively affect my credit report?
It's going to be based on credit utilization. And so we want that credit utilization to be under 30%. If it's under 30%, the answer is no, meaning if you have a credit line or limit of $1,000, let's say, you want your balance, so you're not paying it off in full each month. You want that balance after you make your payment to be under $300. That would get you under the 30% threshold. If you're carrying more of a balance than that, then it will hurt. So the minimum payment is usually only about 2 to 5% of the balance. So you do want to pay more than the minimum, but try to pay enough so that your balance will be less than 30% of your credit limit. Then it won't.
Three more questions. Recently, we lost both grandparents and discovered that they have unpaid credit card debt. What happens to that debt?
If you send a copy of the death certificate to the creditors, it should be canceled. You won't be responsible for that. But the creditors need to know that they've passed away so that they will stop trying to collect on the debt. Now, one caveat, though, is if the estate is wealthy, they could go after the estate. But most of the time, if the decedent, the person who has passed away, does not have a valuable estate, or the debt is very low, or both, then that should be enough.
If you have a judgment that continues to show on one of the credit bureau reports, what should you do again? Kind of refresh that again.
So if the judgment is older than 7 years, then you contact that credit bureau and say, this is older than 7 years and it should be removed.
Okay. And the last question, and then we'll let you have your day back on this tax day 2023. Are auto and mortgage loans the main reason someone would want to leverage good credit? What are some other reasons credit scores matter that may come later in life than earlier? Because obviously buying a home, buying a car, things like that.
So why do I care about good credit? You think about credit. Credit is an opportunity to get a sense of how you manage your obligations. So more and more people are checking credit for things other than extending new credit. So yes, it's really important if you want to take out a loan or a mortgage loan or an auto loan. But in certain fields, it is common that they're going to check your credit. If you want to work in the banking industry, for example, they'll check your credit. If you want to rent an apartment, they will check your credit. If you want to get a cell phone, they will check your credit. So it's more than just taking out loans these days, because think about it from the other perspective. I don't know anything about you, and you're asking me to trust you in some way, whether it's keeping my books or paying your cell phone on time or whatever, or living in my rental apartment. Checking your credit gives me the opportunity to get a good sense of how you manage your obligations, and gives me some sense of your character.
Dr. Yates, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with you. It's always a pleasure to have you on our webinar series.
Thank you. I've appreciated it. And again, if there are any other questions, feel free to contact me.
And just a reminder, a recording of today's webinar will be uploaded onto our website by tomorrow. Once it's online, attendees will receive an email with the replay link. We hope you come back for other upcoming webinars. Come back and join us on Thursday, May 4th for Mischief Managed, the way in which Harry Potter transfixed a generation. We'll welcome a couple of Potterheads as we explore the significance of Harry and his friends have had on today's pop culture. Then on Tuesday, May 23rd, be part of Brainstorming, a deeper look into sports-related concussions. We'll welcome Dr. Sarah Gold, Dr. Heath Hale, and Dr. Kathy Weiss as we delve into this important topic as the second installment into a summer-long series for parents of youth athletes. We'll be shaking things up on Tuesday, June 6th, during Summer Mixology. Mixologist and distiller Brian Rabin will share the fundamentals for 5 drinks we can impress our friends with at your next pool party. And finally, join us for Breaking It Down, Common Orthopedic Injuries in Sports on Thursday, June 15th. Dr. Stephen Brown and Dr. Ian McKeague will be part of the third part of the summer-long series that I mentioned just a second ago. This webinar will take a close look at what injuries you need to be most concerned with. You can register for these or a lot more online at alumni.uab.edu/events. Lastly, let us know how we're doing. The QR code on your screen will take you to a brief survey. Take a few moments and share your feedback on this webinar and what you'd like to see in the future. Once again, thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. And as always, go Blazers.